Coming up on show 844, we ask if more car makers should launch their own unique proprietary charging networks. Plus on the podcast today, Korea expanding their subsidies, more about electric motorsport, fast chargers coming to North Dakota, and a bit of a milestone reached for some free chargers here in the UK. Well, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Sunday 19th of July. My name is Martyn Lee and I go through every EV story so you don't have to. Welcome to a brand new Patreon executive producer. So someone else gets their name in the show notes every single day, a daily credit inside the podcast show notes if you're reading that, and a weekly credit by me on a Sunday show. So today I'll be thanking Renee Kiemick. Thank you so much, Renee Kiemick, for becoming a new executive producer of the podcast. So headline story today, we're asking if more and more car makers should launch their own proprietary charging networks, because it turns out a rumour over the weekend suggests that Volkswagen Group is planning their own proprietary charging network across all of Europe. Now, the magazine called Spiegel is making this claim, and they cite circles around Audi's project Artemis. It looks like initially only Audi drivers actually would benefit from a high-tech network, and then Porsche clients will follow next. According to electrive, the article in the German magazine leaves open whether other Volkswagen brands, or even at some point competitors, will be able to access the network later. The first step, therefore, seems to be a proprietary charging network only for Audi drivers, and then eventually Porsches as well, similar to that of the Tesla supercharging network. Well, neither Spiegel nor Audi name any technical advances or premiums, if you like, that the premium chargers may utilise. In other words, what are the benefits to the consumer? High-power charging is already installed across Europe by a consortium called Ionity. And of course, Volkswagen has a stake and a crucial part in the Ionity network, and with prices that fit an almost exclusive approach as well, it makes you wonder why a car maker would want their own charging network. Now, we know why Tesla did it. Tesla did it back at the beginning because there was nowhere else to charge the cars. So we know that Tesla did it because they would love to have had charging networks out there for their cars, but there simply wasn't. They had to put the Tesla supercharging network in. And as it works out, as it's kind of progressed over the years, it's turned out to be a very good thing for them. Look, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and actually I probably am wrong, but we're always welcome to have that discussion in the comments, or you can email me. I think car makers now, from 2020 onwards, I think launching their own proprietary charging networks with their own plug, their own protocol, their own unique access is not needed. We have the CCS combo plug, and that is ubiquitous across Europe and the US. We have CHAdeMO for now, but we know that's going away because on the latest Nissan, the Ariya that I talked about earlier in the week, they've dropped CHAdeMO from that. So now it's just legacy cars. And so what Mitsubishi Outlander, which is a plug-in hybrid, and the Leafs for as long as they're sold, although there's no Leaf on the roadmap for Nissan. So at some point there'll be no new cars sold with CHAdeMO, and then it's a case of how long do you leave those plugs on the chargers to service the people that bought those cars in good faith. So Europe and the US really, I would say, moving to the CCS combo plug. Tesla have their own plug in the US, but over here they use CCS, they use a Type 2, and then in China, in China, Tesla put China's socket on. So why do we now want the VW plug? It's an incredibly bad idea because from a fundamental point, it's simply not needed. We don't need another plug. Having an extra plug doesn't solve a problem that you and I have in charging our cars. What we want is more chargers, and we have more chargers by providing a robust, consistent, predictable roadmap for the companies that are investing in the infrastructure, investing in the hardware. So there's plenty of companies out there that are building the chargers, and then plenty of other companies who then buy those chargers and either sell them into the market, or for whatever reason, maybe they have deals as exclusive suppliers or whatever. This podcast is sponsored by nationalcarcharging.com in the US and AlohaCharge.com in Hawaii. And they have partnerships with the hardware makers. And then that's their business to get that hardware out into the real world. Why do we now need the VW plug? It's a terrible idea because It's not needed. Let me also add that it adds confusion. And that's what we don't need. Do you remember, if you're an EV owner, right, do you remember the first time ever you charged your car? Now, it may sound silly. You may have charged your car 1,000 times. I remember the first time I was on a road trip going up to a rapid charger, and I had a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nerves. I hope this works. I've got my registration, I've got my RFID card, I know what plug it is, but I'd still never done it before. And it sounds silly saying it all these years later, but I'm just being honest with you. I was nervous the first time I plugged in. I think lots of people feel that level of anxiety. Already, people who aren't into EVs come to this world and now they're like, okay, so it's like a different language that you have to learn. I hate that the most about this. It has its own terminology. CCS, combo, CHAdeMO, AC, Type 2. What? Why do we have to do this? So the more simple it can be, the better. Now the VW plug, it adds confusion. It's also too expensive. Building out your own charging network is ridiculously expensive in terms of leasing the land or land acquisition, in terms of planning it, in terms of getting these things through that take months and sometimes years to get through. The hardware's expensive. Having grid connections is crazy expensive if you're going to have a bank of 10, 12, 20, 40 chargers. It's just too expensive. These companies don't have the money to waste. I'm using that word. They wouldn't, but I'm going to use that word waste when they should be making great EVs for people to buy, not putting up charging networks. It also puts people into silos, and I hate that. Like, the best example that I always come back to is mobile phones. I would love to be able to message all of my contacts on iMessage, but Apple simply won't allow Android to use iMessage. So now I have two. Now I have all of my Apple friends email me within iMessage, and I have another group of friends, some on Android and some on Apple, who use WhatsApp. But it's just another thing that I have to check in a very, very busy day of my phone beeping and bonging and all sorts of emails and everything going off. I've now got two apps to check. It puts people in silos, and that's a terrible idea. Now, I'm not saying that the planet should have just one plug, but if it did, can you imagine how easy it would be for car makers and charging networks to only deal with one plug? I'm just saying. Finally, it will slow down the adoption of EVs. If car makers, whoever, VW, whoever, all insist on having their own version of the Tesla Supercharger network, it will slow down the ultimate goal of having more electric cars on the road because it will add confusion. It will do all the things that I've mentioned above, and people will just stick with their gas cars. It's just too confusing. Okay, I've got to buy an electric car. Okay, right, and where do I charge it? Right, okay. So I'm buying the new Peugeot. Right, okay, there's a charger near me. Oh, no, you can't use that charger. That's the VW charger. You've got to use the one further away from you. That's the Peugeot charger. Honestly, it's a terrible idea. And people will get confused and they won't move to EV. Anyway, my thoughts. A fair amount of my thoughts on there, rather than just reporting the news. I hope you don't mind. I try to keep my opinion out of the podcast as much as possible. It's the weekend, Sorry about that. It's the Sunday show. I think it's a terrible idea. I hope this is nothing more than the German magazine picking up on rumours or possibly even this Project Artemis, something about it which is being discussed. But I hope ultimately VW, Audi, Porsche, whoever is going to put their name on this charging network, this new plug, whatever, it would be a terrible idea if they went ahead with it. But we're working off rumours, and I hope it's not true. All right, back to the news, and less of what I think about stuff. Buyers of EVs in South Korea will be able to pick up state subsidies until 2025, as the government has pushed back the sunset provision date under its goal to have 1.3 million green cars on the road by the same year, 2025. The state imposed sales targets for green cars would also be tweaked to reduce the burden on car makers, with excess sales allowed to be traded as credits like carbon emissions, says Pulse News website. Now, to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, The new plan in South Korea bumped up future vehicle subsidies by 4.5 trillion won. Well, EV subsidies, which were to phase out starting this year and then expire by 2022, have now been extended for another 3 years. Passenger cars are being subsidised till 24, commercial buses and trucks by till 25, and that is great. Another country adding more incentives and maintaining their level of incentives is fabulous. Next story I've talked about a couple of times recently, but you know I love electric motorsport. Well, Stard, S-T-A-R-D, is a company which they say are delighted to announce the world's first road car-based electric motorsport customer program aimed at delivering race-ready competition Ford Fiestas onto the market with a fully electric powertrain. So they'll provide everything you need if you're a customer. You just go along, want to go electric racing, in electric rallycross, you buy the car from them, complete turnkey solution. Now, their car is based on the Ford Fiesta Mark 8. They take the body shell and they develop around it an electric powertrain for the FIA World Rallycross Championship. Well, the Ford Fiesta ERX2 is what they've called it, and I've mentioned that a couple of times recently. Has been developed in-house by the Austrian company Stard, using knowledge, they say, over 10 years of electric motorsport vehicle development. An electric powertrain that has 3 motors, 450 kilowatts, that is 600 plus brake horsepower, and a top speed of 240 kilometers an hour, 4-wheel drive, 2-speed transmission. And if you want to buy one of these, a race-ready Ford Fiesta, I'd love one of these, not to go racing, just to pop to the shops in. Be so cool. If you'd like one, well, it'll only cost you 374,000 euros to be one of the first customers to get one. Customers like the very experienced rallycross team called Holton Motorsport. They're in Norway. They've already put their order in, or has it been delivered? Yeah, it's been delivered actually to Holton. And so, yeah, electric rallycross is coming. We're looking forward to that. Rallycross is a sport which makes sense because the cars always go back to the same place. They can charge. The stages aren't going to deplete the battery, and yet that instant torque from electric motors is exactly what you need on slippery surfaces. Moving on, and a total of 10 North Dakota communities have now received funding to build fast-charging stations from the settlement agreement of Volkswagen's "You Did a Very, Very Bad Thing with Diesel" fine. The Clean Air Act is what I meant to call it. The North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality has just allocated $2.7 million to local governments and businesses for clean vehicle projects, and that does include 17 fast charging stations across the state. On Friday, I was catching up with one of my buddies in America. His name is Kyle, and he has a couple of YouTube channels. One's called Out of Spec Motoring, one's called One Lap, and he owns a Tesla, he owns a Model 3, owns a family-owned Teslas. His wife has a BMW M3, his partner does. So he is so knowledgeable about EVs, and he was saying that I'm charging on the first and only DC fast charging point in North Dakota. And I kind of laughed and said, "What do you mean?" And he said, I'm currently charging my Model 3 on the only DC fast charging point in North Dakota, which I thought he was joking. And then he said, have a look at Google Maps from, where you are in Great Britain. Have a look at Google Maps at North Dakota. I sort of knew where it was in the US, but, my geography is patchy, unless it's, places that I've been, New York, the West Coast, Vegas, Florida, etc. Or if I know someone there, but neither of those apply to North Dakota, and I must confess not knowing a lot about it. So I was enormously surprised to learn, firstly, there's nothing in North Dakota. I mean, really, nothing. My American listeners finding this funny. And also, there is one DC fast charger there. Wow, that's incredible. Well, there's going to be a lot more coming very soon. The communities there plan to charge drivers for electricity that they consume, but the rates haven't been determined, and they don't want to make money out of this. They want to break even. They just want to provide access to EV drivers driving through the rather large North Dakota with more than just one charger there. Spectacular. You learn something new every day. Tesla is, let's talk solar with Tesla, slashing their prices. They've updated their solar pricing again, with the price of the base system of their solar down to $8,200. Bigger systems are actually a little bit more expensive, but it does bring them all kind of in line in the price per kilowatt. Says Electric, the biggest difference is that the base solar system, so the base system that Tesla sell is 4.1 kilowatts. It starts at $8,000 and it'll be $6,000 after incentives. That's an $1,800 price drop before the federal tax credit. And that, to me, seems expensive. Does it seem... I need to check in with Phil Roberts of Electric Future, because he does mega solar projects here in this country. And so I'll check with him on what he... To me, $6,000 sounds like a lot of money. I don't know, like solar's really gone down in price recently. Maybe Tesla will say they got some secret sauce or some magic up their sleeves that you should pay more for their system, or maybe just solar in the US is more expensive. Why would that be? It's a global market. Fill in the gaps if you can with my lack of knowledge. Okay, let's talk about an interview that I read over the weekend. The website Clean Technica caught up with a chap called Peter Carlson. Now, he is the CEO of Northvolt, and he had a few things to say that I thought I would share that's interesting. First of all, Mr. Carlson said that I think the car companies need to come and offer new sustainable products to get back to the kind of demand that they had pre-COVID crisis. And I think this pandemic is actually going to accelerate some of these transitions, because I think consumers have been thinking about this. That's part of it. And also getting economies going after the crisis, he said. He also said, I think every big government around the world is thinking of, where do I get the most bang for the buck in terms of investments in the economy? And many of them, like the European Union, are focusing on these so-called green deals. That's what he has to say. So Northvolt, big cell maker, big contracts with many of the large automakers like BMW, and he's the CEO of the company, saying, look, if you want your best bang for your buck, if you're an economy around the world that suffered with the crisis, with the virus, invest in green products and you'll get a big payback. A big payback for anyone who shops at the supermarket chain Tesco here. Volkswagen, Tesco and Podpoint started this installation. They teamed up to provide free charging in their car parks, and all the ones I've been to are always in banks of 4. There may be some bigger ones and smaller, but I always see them in banks of 4, and they're really well signposted. They are often near the door, which is frustrating. I have seen them iced plenty of times. I've seen EVs, I've seen plug-in hybrids in those spaces not plugged in, and that's frustrating. I want to call those people names on this podcast, but let's keep it friendly. I don't know whether it's a lack of education or they're just certain types of people. However, largely, great signage, massive visual displays, flagpoles, painted ground. So generally people don't ice them, and the groundbreaking partnership, they say, they just installed chargers at the 200th store. 4 EV points were installed at Tesco in Chester. Well, so far enough renewable energy has been given away to drivers to power the homes in a city the size of Chester for a whole day. Over the last year and a half, charging points across the UK have been used 150,000 times by EV owners of every brand, providing their batteries with 669 megawatts of power. We use them all the time. We have 3, this is how many there are, 3 Tesco superstores. I think they call them Tesco Extra, the really big ones that are on 2 floors. They get everything from widescreen tellies to a new pair of pants. They have all had them over the last year installed, and we kind of live between those 3. Triangulate us by Tesco's, and so we shop. Well, these days with the virus a bit different, because we go one by one, and so we don't go as much. A few more home deliveries, but when we do go, we always plug into those, the 7 kilowatt posts. So you're in the shop for an hour. It's a nice amount of charge to get. The Podpoint app always works. They're new, so they're reliable, and congratulations to all the teams involved in that. Right, a couple more stories. Firstly, Connected Energy won their first order for their Second Life energy storage system. They are installing the first new generation of their energy storage system into a project for Suffolk County Council. It's something called The Hold. What is The Hold? It's a council project expected to attract thousands of visitors every year. It's all about researching local history and finding out about families and taking part in local events. It's a £20 million project funded by the National Lottery. So that's what The Hold is. Anyway, it's going to be powered by a Second Life storage system. It's called eStore. And it will help optimize energy use through the day where there's peak loads on the grid. And it's designed to create a controlled environment for the archived materials. It's 360 kilowatt hours in size. There are 24 Second Life Renault Kangoo batteries. And they've done this with Renault and ABB as well. Final story, I love talking about rarities. A certain rare electric hypercar has been spotted in LA. It is the RAESR, or the RAESR, the Rice Advanced Engineering Systems and Research Car. I think you meant to say it RAESR or Racer. Anyway, they have made a car called the Tachyon Speed, and this is the Batmobile. And I couldn't try, if you think I'm exaggerating, I couldn't find any other way of describing it. This electric car is the Batmobile. It uses 6 direct drive motors. It has 1,250 horsepower. Has a top speed of 240 miles an hour. They're taking orders for them now. Prices start at $750,000, go up to $1.5 million. If Jalopnik says, it looks like what the Batmobile would be if Bruce Wayne wasn't such a cheapskate. It is covered in flares and winglets and pointy bits. Now, when you look at the pictures, it's a 2-seater, but it's a tandem. One up the front, one up the back, and the roof opens like a jet fighter canopy. So you slide the roof back and climb out the top. I'm telling you, this is the Batmobile on steroids. Anyway, got to spare $1 million. You can order one of these. Been seen driving around Los Angeles. Looks incredible. Right, thank you very much for listening today. Get on the email and the show on YouTube comments to leave any feedback anytime. 843 shows in the archive. Couldn't do it without my Patreon supporters. Thank you, Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, Brightsmith Group for clean tech talent, Porsche of the Village, Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East, and now National Car Charging and Aloha Charge. Thank you to my partners as well. Been with me for a really, really long time, all of these guys. OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz. I know plenty of my listeners live in New Zealand. Hoping you're going to that website to order your accessories. Hello to Paul O'Connor. Hi to tryev.com, getting people inside EVs. Hello to Gareth Hamer. Hello to Jan at eMobility Norway at eMobilityNorway.com. I spoke to Bob this week, Bob Boothby of Millbrook Cottages and Elopement Wedding Venue, just to ask how he's getting on. They are all reopening now post-virus, and he says, getting back to normal and super busy. I'm going to chat to him on the podcast the next couple of weeks, hopefully, to find out how one business, I mean, he's got chargers, he's got solar, if he hasn't got storage, it's going in. So he's very much he's like you and I want to chat to him just to see how his business, he's a wedding venue. With the virus, it had to close. And so here how he is, here how it's all getting back to normal. And if we do go down to see him, what it's like, he's put some chargers in and that kind of stuff, and what about his solar panels? That'd be awesome. Also to ev-resource.com. Hello to Alan Robson, executive producers, Alan Shedd, Alex Banahini, Alexander Frank, Anders Hove, Andrea Jefferson, Asir Khalid, Ashley Hill, Bjard Fuchstack, Brent Kingsford, Brian Thompson, Bruce Bohannon, Charles Hall, Chris Hopkins, Colin Hennessy, and Cam ZV, Craig Coles, Craig Rogers, Damien Davis, and Darren Bird, Darren Feach, Darren Santa, Yorkshire EV Club, Dave Jewson, David Barkman, David Finch, David Moore, David Partington, David Prescott, Derek Riley from the EV Review Ireland YouTube channel, Don McAllister at screencastsonline.com, Enrico Stefanchillo, Eru Kyunian Yombi, Frederick Rovic, Free Jewel, who's James, Gene Rubin, Gilberto Rosado, Jeff Lowe, Headley Wright, Ian Griffiths, Ian Sear, Ian Watty Watkins, Jack Oakley, James Storr, Jerry Allison, Jim Duggan, Jim Morris, John Bailey, John C. Solar, and John Lacey from Click Like Video NZ. John, who is Beardy McBeardface from Kent EVs, John Manchak, Juan Gonzalez, Ken Morris, Kevin Masson, Carl Mayan, Lars Daliger, Lawrence DeAllen, Lee Brown, Luke Cully, Marcel Lohman, Marcel Ward, Mark Bossett, Martin Croft. He's the Dorset tradesman. Hello to Marty Young, Matt Piccioni, Maz Shah, Michael and Luke Turrell, Mia Oppelstrop, Michael Pastroni, Mike Rogers, Mike Winter, Nathan Gore-Brown, Neil Lee Roberts from Sussex EVs, Nigel Myers, Northern Explorers, Ohad Aston, Paul Ridings, Paul Stevenson, Perry Simpkins, Pete Glass, Pete Gorton, Peter and D Roberts. They're from Oxon EVs. Phil Mouchet, Philip Troutman, Pontus Kimblad, Raj Badwell, Rajiv Narayan, Ralph Jensen, Renee Kimmich. As of today, Renee Schneider, Richard Lipinski, Rob Cooling at appledriving.co.uk, Rob Hermans, Rob from the RS Thinks EV channel on YouTube, Robert Grace, Robin Tanner, Rupert Mitchell, Sari Kangasoja, Seki Payne, Stephen Penn, Steve John, Thomas J. T.S. The Plug Seeker and his YouTube channel, Tim Gutteridge and William Lancorn. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend, whatever you do. Catch you tomorrow for a brand new week on the podcast. And do remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.